to the Power of One. Today, I know this show is really needed for a lot of families who do not have closure after they lose a loved one to violence. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Ryan Backmann, the founder and executive director for Project Cold Case, which is in Florida. Welcome to the show.
You so much for having me, Melanie.
You're welcome. Let's just jump right in. Please tell us about Project Cold Case. When was it established? Why was it established? And what year?
Yeah, absolutely. So to get the whole picture, we have to go back almost 16 years.
Okay.
October 10th, 2009. I am a project manager for an architectural company. My wife is an interior designer. We're almost celebrating our second wedding anniversary. We're at our house on a Saturday afternoon. I looked down at my phone and I had two missed calls from a blocked number and a voicemail. And when I checked the voicemail, it was the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office telling me there had been an emergency and asking me to call them back. So I did. And when I called them back, they connected me to a detective who asked me if I was at home. I said I was, and he said, "Well, I'm turning into your neighborhood now. I'll tell you what's going on when I get there." I asked if everything was okay, and he said, "No, it's not, but I'll tell you what's going on when I get to your house." So I immediately turned to my wife and told her that something bad had happened and that the police were on their way. But in my kind of naive bubble, the worst possible thing that could have happened was maybe a car accident where somebody broke a rib, or, my mom fractured an ankle or was transported to the hospital for observation. I had no idea what I was walking into. So I immediately turned and walked out the front door. By the time I got to my driveway, an unmarked car pulled up. Two plainclothes detectives got out, introduced themselves, and said, "We hate to tell you this, but your father was murdered earlier today."
Oh,
So
no.
yeah, so there's no possible way to prepare for that, no matter what. Even though I was, particularly naive in what I thought what had happened, there was no way. My wife, fell to her knees. We immediately started questioning, where he was, what happened. My dad was a construction worker. He had a superintendent job from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, or, really early, like 6 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, working on a multi-million-dollar oceanfront home in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. But this was a Saturday, and he would pick up side jobs and odd jobs to kind of make extra money, honestly, for my stepmom, who was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and so she was going through treatments, and he was trying to make extra money. So on this particular Saturday, he was cleaning up a newly renovated office building in Jacksonville, Florida, and somebody walked in, saw him in there by himself, walked in. They believed that my dad was vacuuming drywall dust and didn't even know that this individual had come into the building. That the individual, pressed a gun against my dad, which probably startled my dad. And then in a reaction, the individual pulled the trigger, shot my dad one time, reached in his back pocket, took his wallet, and fled the scene. My dad was able to call 911, give a very brief description of the man that had just shot him, but loses consciousness on the phone with a 911 dispatcher, and ultimately is transported to the hospital and declared deceased. So kind of my only experience in the criminal justice world was television, and things in real life are not exactly replicated in television. And so we thought very quickly there would be an arrest made. Very quickly there would be justice and answers. And ultimately, kind of the opposite, quickly started to realize that there was no suspect, that there was no physical evidence, that there was no witnesses, and that the investigators were really struggling to put together who had done this. And so about a year later, I switched careers and became a victim advocate for a small nonprofit that was helping local families that had been impacted by homicide. And I really felt like that was how I was healing, was helping other people, as I'm sure you know, and can
Mhm.
relate. But So I did that for like four years, and then in 2015, I decided that there was these gaps in services for families of unsolved homicides. Like, I mean, I was part of the system that was there to help them, but the judicial process kind of focuses on court, and all of the resources on there are kind of made, available to assist those who are navigating that judicial process. And when there's not been an arrest in your loved one's case, it feels like those resources just aren't available or aren't applicable for you sometimes. And so I really saw a need there and thought I can start my own nonprofit that focuses strictly on these unsolved homicides. And I knew at that time Jacksonville, Florida, is can be a very violent city. And I knew we had about 1,200 unsolved murders in Jacksonville at the time. And I knew a few dozen of those families from my work with the other nonprofits. So I thought this will be an easy transition, and I will have plenty of work to do just within my own community. But then very quickly realized that like there were families all over the country, all over the world that were all seeking these resources and just somebody to vent to and somebody to talk to and somebody that could help them navigate what questions to ask and who to reach out to if they wanted to find out a status of their loved one's case. And so quickly we expanded beyond just Jacksonville and started serving families that reached out to us no matter where they were. There was no way we were going to turn our back on somebody because of where they were geographically located. Now some of those services that we provide are a little different for families that live outside of Jacksonville. We host in-person support meetings for our local families, but we also
Mhm.
host virtual support meetings for families outside of our location. And, we do a lot of work with the law enforcement agencies in our area and with the state attorney's office in our area. And we have built personal relationships with those agencies, which we don't always have the benefit of in other places. But mainly, our goal is to help families heal with or without, a judicial resolution. Of course, that's our goal and our hope, but we're not investigators. We're not, taking a second look at these cases. Our focus is on their healing and allowing them a space to still grieve if they need to, even if it's decades later, or understand a complex system that is not like television. And so that's really where we've kind of settled in. Now we're established 10 years old, an organization, 10 and a half years old. And so we've evolved over those 10 years, over the last decade, to meet families and survivors where they are, and then provide our experience and our knowledge to help them keep moving forward. And I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of with this organization.
Okay. And who does your team consist of?
Yeah, so we have four full-time employees. We're all victim advocates. Two of us are survivors that have lost a loved one to an unsolved homicide. Uh, the other two are University of North Florida criminal justice graduates who realized while they were getting their degrees that, they didn't really want to be police officers, but they wanted to help their community. They were drawn to criminal justice, and advocacy became a way for them to, implement what they've learned and still have an interest in what they're doing and a passion about their careers, while not having to carry a badge and a gun and potentially pull people over at 3 o'clock in the morning for out taillights. We use those. We have also two interns from the University of North Florida's criminal justice program and a volunteer. So that's our staff. We have an office in downtown Jacksonville. I can see the police memorial building from my window. I can walk there. I can escort families there. A few blocks the other direction is the state attorney's office, city hall, and the courthouse. So in those kinds of needs, if we need those resources, we can get there very quickly. Also, our office is very centrally located. So if families need to come to us for our support meeting or whatever, they're not having to drive far one end of the city or the other. Jacksonville's very large. It can take you an hour to get from one side to the other. So we think that that's important to have accessibility for everybody, and so that's where we have grown to from when I started this organization. It was me in my home office and with
Mhm.
my infant daughter in my lap, and now, even with 4 full-time employees and, interns and volunteers, it's really hard to keep up.
Mhm.
We serve, so we don't just Google a cold case and then add them to our website. Our services are for families. They're for families that want our help and that reach out to us. And so we have over 1,800 families
Mhm.
from 48 states, Canada, DC, Puerto Rico, Germany, the Virgin Islands, Jamaica, and South Korea that have all reached out to us for our help. So we focus, on those families. Only North Dakota and Hawaii are the states without victim representation on our platform.
Okay. Okay. Now, I deal with often mothers and fathers and grandparents who are just so heartbroken, one, because they lost their loved one to violence, whatever form that was, but then that the offender was not apprehended, and it just hurts them so much. And you are right, going back to what you said, a lot of people will say, well, listen, according to the first 48, or according to this TV show, and I have to be very mindful in what I'm saying to them. It is just that. It is a TV, it's entertainment. That's not real life. But Ryan, what steps could your agency help with those who may say, listen, I have a video or I have footage that the police they have not looked at yet, and I know this could help solve that murder. How does your agency help with that or guide those families?
So really important with families is, the number one complaint we get is a lack of communication from law enforcement. Like by far, the biggest complaint families bring to us is that they haven't heard from the detective in years or decades, and that there seems to be this gap in within law enforcement that families can provide valuable information. Like, I don't know why that is dismissed, but it is something we see regularly. And I think part of that is because law enforcement is trying to create boundaries. You're the family, we're the investigators, you're emotionally connected, and we're not. We're about facts and physical findings. But we have a lot of families that have important and valuable information that is sometimes not received or not sought. And so how we deal with that is kind of a nuanced approach. And so I'll be honest, sometimes our families get a little frustrated with the process because it is not a short and quick process. In our experience, what we have learned is, and I hesitate to use the word manipulative because we're not trying to manipulate people, but we are being very intentional about our steps. So when I say we start with reaching out to law enforcement and asking if the case is active, a family may know that. A family may know it is or it isn't active. But this is the process because now we're creating a paper trail and information that, should we get to a point where we have to hold somebody accountable for something that they are doing that is against policy standards or, harmful to a victim or their family, we have this entire trail of how we have gone about doing this, which again is a very intentional method of reaching out to law enforcement. Who is assigned? Can I have their desk number? If it's not assigned to a detective, how do I get it assigned to a detective? All right, so now we get to that point. I would like to have a meeting with you. Virtual meetings now are easy to do. So even if
Mhm,
families are
mhm,
out of town, there's no excuse for not being able to have a conversation semi face to face with law enforcement. So now I need to know what you're willing to tell me about the investigation. Now I need to share with you what I know about the investigation. Now I need to set up a follow-up meeting And I'm going to let you, the investigator, decide what that time frame is. With the information I gave you and what you need to do with it, how long is that going to take you? Can I reach back out to you in 6 weeks? Will 6 weeks be enough time for you to review this information I have provided you and you to be able to give me something back when we call? Oh, that's not enough time? Okay, 8 weeks? Like, I will give you the time, and this is sometimes hard, but I will give law enforcement all of that freedom to dictate how long they need, whether it's to review the case file, check the physical evidence and see what's in the warehouse, send evidence off to a lab, which is oftentimes even more than 8 weeks. But I will let them dictate that because I'm going to hold them accountable, and I'm going to set a reminder on my phone and on my calendar that at that point, if I have not heard back from you, you're going to get a call from me. And we're going to have a conversation about where things are. And I think what's important about that is, we don't have to be best friends with the investigators. We don't have to go to barbecues with them. But there should be a mutual respect. I mean, a family deserves a bit of respect for what they have gone through and what they have lost. And they're not asking for the world. A lot of times they may be emotional, they may be frustrated, they may be angry, but that's because they are completely left out of this investigation. They have zero control over who did this, how much evidence they left, who's willing to come forward to give information, who's willing to testify, whether technology is advanced enough for the physical evidence that was left at the scene. You're stripped of all of that, and then you're told, go sit over there and wait. And we'll get back with you. And that's a really hard thing to ask a family to do that is grieving and suffering and wants answers and accountability. Now, where we kind of shift a little bit is because so much of that is out of our control, families and us as an organization, we want to focus on healing no matter what that outcome is, because it's completely out of our control. And so part of that healing is, one, your loved one getting value, right? So we see the same victims on every Netflix documentary, and we see the same faces on all the podcasts and all this. We know who's getting attention. And as a family of somebody who is not getting attention, that exponentially harms you, right? I mean, you start to believe that your loved one doesn't have the same value of somebody else that is popular in the media, and that's not true, and it's not fair, right? So what we want to do is we want to push that value again, that your loved one is important and does matter, and I don't care if they bought drugs, sold drugs, used drugs, sold their body, they did not deserve to die, and their investigation should not be limited or dismissed because of those things. And so what we do is we're going to use our platform to raise awareness for those cases, to make sure that that family understands that their loved one is just as important to us as anybody else that has ever experienced this kind of violence. And I would also kind of say that with a caveat that, like, I'm not mad at people that get all the attention. I just think that everybody should get the same amount of it.
It should be fair across the board. That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. Now, you said something that was very interesting. So, say there is a case from Pennsylvania, and a family comes to you and says, I have an unsolved murder. So, do you connect with Philly PD? Do you connect with the district attorney's office in Philly? And can you do that? Can you call and say, okay, this is where we are. We're working with this family, and we want to see what you have. And of course, some stuff they can't tell you because it's probably an ongoing investigation. But walk us through someone who would call from another state. What would your advocates do? How would they do it for that particular case? And I know everything is a case by case basis.
Of course. And so here's what, and when we first started, we would make all of those calls, law enforcement, district attorney, whoever. And what we started learning was that the reality is the family will always be their own best advocates, right? Like, they have to take a lead in this role. So we will walk with them. If they are having a hard time, we will reach out. But you can imagine if if an agency, a police department is kind of closing the door on a family, you can imagine that a nonprofit from another state reaching out
Right.
usually doesn't get any better result, right? Now, after 10 years of building relationships and networking and a reputation, I will say that sometimes when they know we're involved, they will give a little more care because they don't necessarily want that negative reflection. And they do know, I mean, we do tons of training with law enforcement all over the country. And there are really good detectives out there that truly care about these cold cases and unsolved cases. But there's a bit of a culture issue within law enforcement that has always been keep everybody outside of these walls on the outside. They can't help. We can handle it. We've got it under control. And we're seeing that shift a little bit. And so one of the things that we do, like the very first, we have a submission form on our website at projectcoldcase.org. And that's where a family will submit their loved one to us. And when that submission comes in, an advocate reaches directly out to the family. We finalize the intake process. And then our first order of awareness is every Friday on social media, we post the last 5 cases that came in, or we limit it to 5 so that everybody's picture is viewable on Facebook, basically. Excuse me. And when we write up the narrative about that victim, if that agency has a social media page on Facebook and Instagram, we tag their page. And we do that again, intentionally and deliberately. One, we want them to know that we are involved now, that
Mm.
this family has reached out to us, that we are an organization that is built by survivors for survivors. That our goal is to help raise awareness and to advocate for that victim. And so that, like, right out of the gate is the first thing we
Mhm.
do, and we want those agencies to know right away that we're here and we are now
Mhm.
working with this family. Not, be scared of us, but
Mhm. Mhm.
understand that we are building a network of survivors that are hurting and that are
Mhm.
coming together to try at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, right? We want
Right.
bad people off the street. We want them held accountable for their actions. And we want to heal as survivors, as family members, and as a community. I know the violence in Philly and that the harm that goes with that as a community cannot really be quantified.
Mhm.
And the only way to start healing is to start resolving these cases and letting these families know that their loved one mattered and that the person or persons responsible is being held accountable and can't do it to somebody else.
Do you guys have a success rate, if you will, where in helping these families that sometimes the murders were solved?
Yeah. So 1,800 plus families, victims that have been submitted to us, 1,800 plus families that we serve. We have 73 cases that have been featured on our platform that have ended in some form of resolution. Now, some of those are an arrest was made and we're awaiting trial. Some of
Hmm.
those where an arrest was made, a conviction was obtained, and these people are serving, their sentence and being held accountable. Unfortunately, some of those the offender has already passed or
Mm-hmm.
is serving time, for another case, and they're not going to be charged. But at
Hmm.
least, and this is why we're always very careful about expectations, because I don't know if families have considered the fact that even if we find this person, they might be dead. And
Right.
then how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? But that all being said, 73 cases, we're very proud that we have had at least some kind of part in getting those families the answers. I mean, I believe you can heal without those answers, but
Hmm.
obviously getting that arrest, getting those answers,
Hmm.
getting
Hmm.
accountability jump starts the healing exponentially, you
I
know.
agree.
But I also have to accept that some of these things are out of my control because
Hmm.
of the network I have built, because of the organization's reputation. There are a lot of people out there that want to solve my dad's case. I mean, a lot, and they have done a lot of things that, quite honestly, probably other victims haven't received, because there is a desire to be able to say, we did this for Ryan, or we did this, for Project Cold Case, and what,
Mhm.
what it stands for. But his case remains unsolved. And all that work that has gone into it, I don't foresee a resolution happening. There's just not enough information out there. There's not a suspect. There's not physical evidence. So I'm not waiting on technology. Like, literally, I would need somebody to come forward and confess. And, and while that has happened, that doesn't happen often.
Right.
Somebody for no
Yeah.
reason doesn't often walk in and confess to
Mhm.
killing another human being. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard just to, again, for a mother, a father, a son, or daughter, just to know that someone took something so valuable from me. Like, how could you do that and not have those answers? Is just so horrible. But Ryan, I thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. And please tell the viewers how they can get in contact with you, all of your social media channels and your phone numbers, and tell them how they can contact you.
Well, thank you again, everybody in Philly, and whoever's watching this and sees this. If you have a loved one, I invite you to go to our website, projectcoldcase.org. In the top right-hand corner, there's a menu button that allows you to submit your loved one and put a little bit of that power back in your hands. And then we will reach out and we will follow up. We have very little criteria. We ask that the case be over a year old. We ask that it have been, ruled a homicide, and we ask that a family member be the one that is submitting it. And in the case of missing persons, we ask that the family suspect that foul play was involved. We don't, if somebody believes their loved one's coming home and they've been missing for a number of years, you probably don't want them on a website with faces of murder victims, but we will help you if you do believe that it's foul play. So Project Cold Case is on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and you can just search Project Cold Case on all those platforms.
Thank you again, Ryan, for joining me today.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so much for joining me today. We understand that sometimes you're hurting because the offender was not apprehended. That took a loved one from you. But we care, and we will try to do everything that we can to bring you some healing and some closure. This resource is so valuable. We truly care about you, and we truly love you. Peace and love.